On the earth of 100 whispered winds and 1,000 unsung stories, where the sun's light fell equally upon three distinct yet intertwined races, humans, shadows, and flames, names held a special power. To speak a name aloud was to call it forth into reality, to birth it from the void of possibility. A careful whisper could conjure a fleeting wisp of that name's essence, a fragile illusion that might fade after a few heartbeats. A confident, booming shout might forge a more lasting creation, solid and tangible enough to survive a skirmish or a journey. And truly thunderous cries, legends said, could even shape empires. Yet for all the wonder this power provided, life on Earth remained far from simple. Here, every human was born alongside two counterparts, a shadow and a flame. The shadow reflected not simply a silhouette on the ground, but a person of inverse morality. Where the human valued kindness, the shadow might value cruelty. Where the human valued honesty, the shadow might prize cunning. They were bound by fate to cross paths at a turning point in life. Flames, on the other hand, were something else entirely, the romantic counterpart to both the human and their shadow, an embodiment of passion and love that dwarfed the petty rivalries below. Flames were revered and adored, the nobility of this world, served and entertained by both humans and shadows alike. To become truly great, a human aspired to overcome their shadow, find their flame, and master the art of names so thoroughly they could raise kingdoms from their very words, joining the venerable class known as the Elders. Yet such accomplishments were rare. More often, people wandered and struggled, living under the yoke of destiny, grasping at words and songs of power, and forever glancing over their shoulders, wary of their shadow. It was into this swirling tapestry of destiny and desire that Kugo was born. A young adult human with a broad grin, country manners, and muscles honed from wrestling cattle and chopping wood, Kugo stood apart from his more studious peers. While others spent their days in cramped classrooms or grand libraries, memorizing the ancient lexicons of the name art, Kugo practiced the old ways of physical strength and martial skill. He would whisper spear and form a thin, breakable shaft in his hand only to spin and jab it into a training dummy before it evaporated. Then he would bellow spear again with all his lung power and watch a sturdier one form, wield it like a warrior, and combine its fluid thrusts with precise punches and swift kicks. Kugo was unconventional. Most scholars scoffed at his methods. Why kick when you could summon a blade? Why punch when you could say the name of a fortress's gate and block the blow? Kugo's simple answer was always the same: because I love a good fight. He saw life as a grand adventure, full of hearty meals and sweaty training sessions. Yet behind his friendly demeanor lay a focused mind, one set on a single task: to defeat his own shadow as soon as possible. Kugo believed that once the shadow was gone, the road to finding his flame and living a life of comfort and love would lie wide open. There would be no moral opposite haunting him, no twisted reflection lurking behind every turn. He would be free. He did not believe in befriending a shadow. How could you befriend someone destined to oppose everything you stood for? How could you embrace an enemy who was fated to cross your path at your most vulnerable? No, he decided long ago that the only logical solution was to become strong enough to defeat his shadow soundly and move on with his life. He did not wish them harm for harm's sake, he simply believed in removing obstacles swiftly and efficiently. Still, fate had other plans. In a modest inn on a grassy plain not far from the frontier of elder-held lands, Kugo sat chewing a roasted leg of pheasant and laughing along with a few travelers who shared his table. They asked him if he had studied at a famous school of names. He shook his head, mouth full, and said that he preferred practicing aloud in the open fields, calling forth river, sword, shield at varying volumes to find that delicate threshold where a name could be made manifest. He boasted about how he could snap kick a summoned chair and then shout chariot, to ride off before it vanished. The travelers smiled, a bit confused, but they appreciated his warmth. It was then that she arrived, Cheyenne, the psychic medium with an otherworldly air about her. Cheyenne stepped into the inn with a tinkerer's toolkit slung over one shoulder and a crystalline headset perched atop her braided dark hair. She had sophisticated eyes that seemed to pierce the veil between worlds. In truth, her soul had not been born here, she was a reincarnation of a being from another distant planet. On that world, they did not speak names into existence. Their magics were subtle, telepathic, and carried across light years by mental resonance. Thus, Cheyenne could not summon things with names. She possessed a different kind of magic, alien psychic abilities that let her sense the presence of flames, communicate with distant spirits, and tinker together devices of impossible complexity. Many humans and shadows came to her to ask for help finding their flame, and she charged a handsome fee for her services. Over time, she had grown wealthy and built strange contraptions to magnify her psychic visions. Yet for all her worldly success, Cheyenne was unfulfilled. She was quite, in her own words, boy crazy, but no earthly man she met felt like a true match. She worried that her flame might not even be on this planet. Her power revealed others' flames easily enough, but for her own, there was only silence. She wanted love so desperately. She wanted it more than money, more than praise, more than life itself. Yet she doubted any earthborn human or shadow could fill that void. As she entered the inn, her psychic senses nudged her attention toward Kugo. He was laughing and banging his mug on the table. A solid, strapping man who wasn't bad-looking, though a bit rough. She sighed to herself, thinking, he might be fun for a few days, but I doubt he's my flame. Still, she was curious. She approached and spoke softly. You. The martial artist who likes to name things. Can I sit? Kugo, mouth half full, gestured broadly to the bench beside him. Of course. Name's Kugo, he said. What's yours? Cheyenne, she answered, scanning him with a subtle telepathic sweep. She saw hints of spiritual vitality, glowing strands of destiny connecting him to two distant figures, a looming darkness and a radiant presence. His shadow and his flame, no doubt. She could sense he was powerful but rough-hewn, not yet refined. She also sensed that he'd never met his flame, and that day of confrontation with his shadow had not yet come. She wondered if maybe she could help him locate his flame, perhaps if she succeeded for him, he might have connections to others who needed her services. As the night wore on, the inn's common room grew quiet. Kugo and Cheyenne spoke at length. He told her of his dream: defeat the shadow, find the flame. I don't get why people waste time dancing around their shadows, he said, waving a hand dismissively. If I can just get rid of mine early, I can spend all my effort calling forth a kingdom's worth of comfort for my flame and me. You know, build a nice home, maybe a castle, fill it with good food and laughter. He punched the air enthusiastically. I'm training in martial arts so that when I finally do meet my shadow, I can end the fight in seconds. Cheyenne smiled thinly. What if you can't find your flame? She asked quietly. What if your flame isn't even on Earth? Kugo looked at her, confused. That's not possible, he said. Every human has a flame and a shadow on Earth, right? Cheyenne shrugged. So they say. She didn't reveal her own doubts. Instead, she offered him a deal. I can help you sense your flame's presence. I can't do the naming art myself, but I have ways to amplify my psychic abilities. If you help me gather a rare mineral, Astralis stone, from the hills to the south, I can build a device that might point us toward your flame. Kugo was intrigued. You mean I could find her even before I meet my shadow? His eyes gleamed with excitement. The thought of reversing the natural order, finding love first, fighting second, appealed to his adventurous spirit. Sure. Let's go find this stone. In return, you help me sense my flame. As they sealed the bargain, the door of the inn rattled. Enter Romulan, the alien observer. He was tall and slender, clad in a sleek space-traveling suit with glowing panels. A laser rifle hung at his hip, and his luminous orange saucer drifted quietly outside, tethered to the roof by a beam of light. Romulan had been assigned by a distant galactic peacekeeping force to study Earth, its strange triad of humans, shadows, and flames, and the bizarre art of naming. He knew almost everything about the universe beyond this planet, the languages of the Starfishers, the intricate politics of the Crystal Forgers of Tarquin IV, the subtle telepathic harmonics of Cheyenne's people. Yet here, on Earth, he was a clueless child. No planet he had ever encountered allowed words to conjure reality. It baffled and fascinated him. He had picked Kugo and Cheyenne at random to follow, intrigued by the contrast of their energies. He took a seat without asking, drawn by their conversation. Greetings, he said, voice crisp and oddly formal. I am Romulan, a field researcher. He tapped his temple and sent a mild telepathic introduction. Kugo frowned at the intrusion, and Cheyenne perked up, recognizing an off-world telepath. Romulan continued, I come in peace. I wish to learn about the art of names and the curious relationships you share. May I accompany you on your journey? I promise not to interfere, unless I see something unjust. Kugo glanced at Cheyenne. She tilted her head thoughtfully. He might be useful, she admitted. Romulan nodded sagely as though he had been invited all along. Thus, the trio was formed, an unlikely band setting forth into the night. They journeyed south, where grassy plains gave way to rolling hills flecked with shimmering streams. Kugo jogged ahead, calling out torch. Softly to conjure a faint, flickering light. It would vanish in minutes if he didn't raise his voice, but he didn't want to disturb the peaceful night. He was saving his voice for when it really mattered. Cheyenne walked with a device she had cobbled together, a metal rod topped with crystals that hummed softly. Romulan hovered behind them, half floating in the low gravity field generated by his saucer's tether, documenting their progress in a mental diary transmitted across the stars. Their trek took them past a small village, where a group of humans and shadows carried offerings of fruit and flowers to a flame who lounged on a dais of conjured pillows. The flame's presence was undeniable. There was a radiant warmth that made both humans and shadows blush and murmur with admiration. Kugo watched with awe. To think that one day he might have his own flame waiting for him, someone who would share his joys and adventures. Cheyenne observed the flame with jealousy and yearning. Why couldn't her life be that simple? Romulan recorded every detail, fascinated by how both humans and shadows served this flame with equal devotion. They pressed onward. After a day's travel, they reached the Astralis Hills. These hills sparkled with tiny fragments of star metal embedded in the rock. This was what Cheyenne needed to build a powerful psychic amplifier. Kugo cracked his knuckles, ready for some action. Sure enough, the moment they began to pry the stone free, trouble found them. A gang of wandering shadows, displaced rogues, emerged from behind boulders. They had sensed Kugo's presence and were drawn by the scent of conflict. Perhaps one among them was Kugo's own shadow, masked and waiting. But as the bandits approached, laughing cruelly, Kugo's heart pounded. He didn't know which shadow was his, nor did it matter right now. He wanted to test his strength. The shadow sneered, "Well, what have we here? A human who plays with fists instead of words, a psychic girl who can't even name a spoon into existence, and some alien freak. You're in our territory now. Hand over the Astralis stone." Romulan bristled at their insult. He reached for his laser rifle, but his training was minimal. He wavered, unsure. Cheyenne gritted her teeth. She might not conjure weapons, but she could sense their violent intentions and try to cloud their minds. Kugo stepped forward, rolling his shoulders. "You want to fight? Fine," he said, lowering his stance. He whispered sword and formed a flimsy blade of ghostly light. It would barely hold together, he needed more volume. "Sword," he repeated, louder. The blade solidified, steel-like, and he brandished it in one hand. With his other hand, he curled into a fist. "I don't just rely on names," he said, grinning. "I've got my own strength." He leapt forward, swinging the summoned sword and then pivoting into a roundhouse kick. The shadows hissed, summoning objects of their own. "Shield," they yelled, and each conjured a buckler of various strengths. Kugo's sword clanged against a particularly well-named shield and shattered into sparks. But Kugo expected this. He followed through with a punch to the shadow's gut, sending them sprawling. Another shadow cried bow. And launched an arrow of ephemeral light. Kugo ducked and shouted, "Wall." A sturdy wooden panel blinked into existence just long enough to catch the arrow. Then he leapt above it and came down with a fierce kick that dispersed the archer's bow like dust. Cheyenne closed her eyes, channeling her alien psychic power. She couldn't name objects, but she could muddle the senses of her foes. The shadows felt their perceptions distort as Cheyenne's telepathic tinkering scrambled their focus. One tried to shout, "Lance." But it came out a weak whisper, summoning only a fragile twig of a weapon. Romulan, emboldened, fired a warning shot from his laser rifle. The beam sizzled over their heads, leaving them startled. The shadows began to retreat, disoriented and outmatched by this strange trio. Kugo chased them down, not to harm but to scare them off. "Next time, pick a different target," he shouted. The shadows fled into the dusk, and Kugo returned triumphantly to his companions. Romulan gave an approving nod. "Impressive," he said. "Your martial arts combined with naming is quite unique. I've never seen anything like it." Cheyenne managed a half-smile. She admired his courage and skill. And Kugo, breathing hard, grinning from ear to ear, felt alive. For a moment, he forgot about his grand plan to defeat his shadow early. He was just happy to protect his friends. They gathered the Astralis stone and made camp. Around the crackling fire, conjured by Kugo, who shouted firewood. And spark. Several times until a warm blaze crackled, Cheyenne worked with delicate tools and alien crystals. She combined them with the Astralis stone to create a thin circlet that shimmered with psycho-reactive energy. When she placed it on her head, her psychic range expanded exponentially. She could feel countless souls drifting across the planet, humans, shadows, and the radiant presence of flames. She focused on Kugo, searching through that vast tapestry for the one who harmonized with his soul. "I see," she whispered, eyes closed. "Your flame is a woman of strong will, a leader among her kind. She dwells near the kingdom of an elder. The elder, a legendary human who overcame his shadow and rules from a mountainside fortress, hosts lavish tournaments to amuse local flames. Your flame will be present at one such tournament. But," Cheyenne's voice wavered, "your shadow will be there too. It seems that your destined confrontation is set to occur at this event. Kugo's heart raced. This was perfect. He could defeat his shadow and find his flame all in one place. Which elder's kingdom? He asked eagerly. Cheyenne concentrated. Elder Maraval, she said. A kingdom carved into red stone cliffs, facing a shimmering desert. We must travel east. Romulan hovered closer. A tournament. Fantastic. I shall observe and record. Perhaps this will help me understand your world's rules of engagement. Count me in. Kugo stood and struck a heroic pose. Then east we go. The journey to Elder Maraval's kingdom took several days. The trio crossed windswept valleys and trudged through forests where the trees whispered half-forgotten names. Kugo trained as they traveled, summoning objects at different volumes: club. Softly for a quick practice weapon, axe. Louder for a durable tool to chop firewood. He'd set up makeshift targets and practice punching through them after summoning a barrier to strike against. Cheyenne would roll her eyes but secretly admired his dedication. Romulan asked countless questions about the nature of naming. Kugo tried to explain, the louder and more confident you say it, the stronger it becomes. But you can't just scream nonsense, you must know the name intimately. And you can't overdo it, shouting yourself hoarse can leave you too weak to speak new creations. Cheyenne's psychic abilities continued to blossom under the influence of her new circlet. Yet with each passing day, she grew more anxious. The presence of Kugo's flame was so clear, so strong. This flame would be perfect for him, and possibly even for his shadow. Cheyenne felt a pang of envy. She still could not sense her own flame. Did such a person even exist on this planet? Her advanced mind told her to be patient. True love could not be forced. But her heart screamed for immediate satisfaction. Romulan observed these emotional currents with fascination. On his homeworld, or the worlds he'd studied, romance was rarely tied to cosmic destiny. Love was a personal affair, not an inevitable intersection of three souls. He found Earth's system both elegant and troubling, elegant because each human had a perfectly compatible partner, but troubling because that partner was also destined for their shadow. Three lives tangled in a single knot of love and rivalry. He wondered if Earth's art of names extended beyond objects. Could one name love into existence? Probably not. Love had no shape to be conjured by voice alone. It had to be earned through understanding. Eventually, they reached Elder Maraval's domain. The kingdom sprawled along a cliffside, red stone towers hewn from rock by powerful naming. Maraval was rumored to have once shouted the name Palace. So loudly that an entire fortress carved itself out of the cliff face. He must have known the intricacies of stone and architecture intimately to achieve such a feat. Few elders existed, fewer still with such grand kingdoms. The tournament grounds lay in a spacious arena ringed by terraces. Flames reclined in luxury boxes, watching humans and shadows duel with summon weapons. The matches were primarily exhibitions, magnificent displays of conjuration skill. Kugo spotted many flames dressed in silks and surrounded by servants. He tried to find the one who matched Cheyenne's vision. She pointed to a balcony where a regal flame with fiery red hair and golden eyes surveyed the arena. Kugo's heart fluttered. He felt drawn to her beauty, her confidence. Could she be the one? Before Kugo could approach, a hush fell over the crowd. Another arrival. A black-robed figure strode into the arena. Kugo felt a chill. He recognized this sensation from stories and intuition alone. His shadow had arrived. The figure pulled back a hood, revealing a face eerily similar to Kugo's but sharpened, crueler around the eyes. Where Kugo grinned, his shadow smirked. Where Kugo's eyes were bright with curiosity, the shadows burned with calculated cunning. He carried himself like a dark reflection. The flame on the balcony leaned forward, intrigued. The crowd murmured with excitement. Humans and shadows often confronted each other here to prove their worth. She wanted entertainment, something that would stir her passion. Kugo jumped into the arena without hesitation. This is it, he muttered, cracking his knuckles and staring at a shadow. I'll end this now. After I'm done, I'll meet my flame. The shadow laughed, the sound like glass scraping stone. You really think it's that easy, Kugo? He said, voice dripping with disdain. You know nothing. You think summoning a few weapons and throwing punches makes you worthy of your flame? You think by destroying me you'll claim her heart? He raised his arms. Come then. Name your strongest creation, scream it to the heavens. Kugo snarled. I don't need you or your philosophy. I'll show you I can handle this, he shouted, battle staff. At the top of his lungs. A sturdy staff of black iron manifested in his hands, crackling with summoned energy. He spun it in a dazzling display, striking sparks off the arena floor. The shadow responded in kind. "Glaive," he yelled, voice resonating through the amphitheater. A long, wicked blade on a pole appeared, sharper and more solid than Kugo's staff. The two charged at each other, weapons clashing. Kugo used his martial arts, sweeping low and jabbing high. The shadow responded with elegant cruelty, turning Kugo's force against him. Cheyenne and Romulan watched from the sidelines, tense. Cheyenne felt torn. She had helped Kugo find this place, and now he was risking everything. Was this necessary? Could not these two understand that love was not a trophy to be claimed but a bond that formed naturally? She concentrated, trying to sense the flame's emotions. The regal flame seemed bored, amused, but not truly invested in the outcome. Cheyenne's heart sank. These people were fighting over her as if she were a prize, and she didn't even seem to care. Romulan couldn't stand it. "This is madness," he muttered. "Love isn't a spoils of war." He considered intervening, but what could he do? He had sworn not to interfere unless he saw clear evil, and this was destiny at play. Still, it felt wrong. He was beginning to see that Earth's system was not the elegant destiny he first perceived but a tangled mess of expectations and misunderstandings. In the arena, the battle raged. Kugo slammed his staff into the shadow's glaive, and both weapons crackled and shattered into shimmering dust as their creators failed to maintain their integrity. Both men jumped back and began shouting new names at full volume. "Spear!" cried Kugo, veins popping in his neck. A fine steel spear formed. He lunged forward. "Halberd!" shouted the shadow. A massive polearm burst into existence. The shadow swung it in a heavy arc. Kugo deflected with difficulty. Their voices grew raw. Each new summoning taxed their throats and lungs. The duel became a contest of endurance, not just skill. Kugo began mixing in punches, kicks, and flips, which caught the shadow off guard. The crowd gasped as Kugo delivered a spinning kick that knocked the halberd from the shadow's hands. But the shadow reacted swiftly. "Mace," he roared, producing a spiked club and swinging it close enough to graze Kugo's ribs. Pain flared, but Kugo grinned. He liked a challenge. This was a real fight, more exhilarating than any he had experienced. Yet as he fought, he realized something. He had come here thinking that once he defeated his shadow, his life would be perfect. But the flame's distant, uninterested gaze troubled him. Was this how love should begin? Shouldn't his flame care about who he was, not just how well he fought? He hesitated, and the shadow capitalized, slamming the mace into his conjured shield. The shield splintered. Kugo stumbled. Suddenly, a voice cut through the noise, not from either fighter but from above. The flame on the balcony stood and spoke. "You both fight impressively," she said, "but do you think that violence alone will earn my love?" Kugo looked up, shocked. The shadow narrowed his eyes. The flame's words rang out like a bell. "I am not a trophy. I have my own desires. I enjoy watching, yes, but do you think I'd choose someone who sees me as a final prize? I am more than your destiny. I am a person." Kugo's heart sank. He glanced at his shadow. For a brief moment, he saw something human there, doubt, regret. The shadow lowered his mace. Perhaps he, too, realized how foolish this all was. Cheyenne seized the moment. She stepped forward and projected her voice with a psychic echo. "Love can't be forced," she called. "No one should be fought over like an object. If you truly want your flame's love, show her your character, your kindness. Fighting might prove strength, but it does not prove worthiness." Romulan smiled softly. He felt relief that someone had voiced this truth. Kugo's fists trembled. He had always believed defeating his shadow was the only way forward. But what if that wasn't true? What if he could find love by simply being himself, by discovering who he was outside of this predestined rivalry? He lowered his arms and let the spear fade. "I'm not going to fight you anymore," he said to his shadow. "We're too different, yes, but maybe that's okay. I don't think I need to destroy you. I just need to live my life." The shadow stared, stunned. Then he laughed, a quieter, less cruel laugh. Well, you grow wiser, human. Perhaps this world doesn't have to revolve around our struggle." The shadow let his mace dissolve into mist. He turned to the flame and bowed. "I desire your love, but not like this. I will become someone worthy of it, if I can." The flame considered them both, intrigued by their growth. She was not ready to choose anyone yet, that much was clear. But she nodded approvingly. "I've watched many fights here. Yours is the first where both combatants found something more meaningful than victory. Perhaps one day, I will be interested in one of you, but you must prove yourselves in life, not just in battle." Kugo felt oddly peaceful. He had not slain his shadow, nor had he secured his flame's love, but he had learned something far more valuable. He didn't have to follow the script fate had given him. Life was what he made it. He could still train, still enjoy a good fight, but he did not have to turn everything into a desperate struggle for dominance. He could wait for love to bloom naturally, rather than forcing it. Cheyenne watched this unfold and smiled softly. Maybe she, too, could learn patience. She had been chasing love desperately. Yet here, she saw that true love couldn't be summoned like a name. It emerged when all parties were ready. She resolved to keep searching, not through frantic obsession, but through open-minded curiosity. She would continue using her psychic gifts to help others. Someday, perhaps, she would meet a being, maybe even from another planet, who felt like her match. Romulan hovered overhead, impressed by the turn of events. He recorded everything telepathically, transmitting it across the galaxy. He had learned that Earth's magic and culture were more complex than he ever imagined. Justice was not always about stopping a clear evil, but also about encouraging understanding. Perhaps, when he returned to his galactic peacekeeping force, he could argue that Earth deserved respect and understanding rather than interference. One day, he hoped, he could apply this newfound wisdom and become more than a simple field researcher, maybe a field officer who could mediate disputes across worlds. As the tournament ended, the crowd dispersed. Some were disappointed that no clear victor emerged, but others were inspired. Elder Maraval, watching from a distance, smiled. He recognized the seeds of greatness in these travelers. He whispered a name, Feast, and summoned a grand banquet for all, wanting to celebrate the unusual conclusion. Cheyenne and Kugo ate together under the starlight, Romulan drifting nearby. They talked about the future. Kugo mentioned he might travel to other elder kingdoms, learn more advanced naming techniques, and incorporate them into his martial arts. Cheyenne teased him about becoming an elder himself someday. Kugo, chuckling, admitted that he might try. Romulan vowed to continue observing, hoping to understand even more about Earth and possibly help maintain peace. And what of the shadow? He slipped away quietly, but not before offering Kugo a nod of respect. Perhaps their paths would cross again, not as bitter enemies but as respectful rivals. Neither of them knew what destiny would bring, but they understood it need not be bound by hatred. Night fell softly on the kingdom carved into red cliffs. Far above, distant stars shimmered. Cheyenne's alien soul felt a subtle call from the cosmos, reminding her that reincarnation and travel between worlds was possible, if rare. Perhaps her flame was out there among the stars. Until then, she would live fully, harnessing her strange gifts to help others and to invent wondrous machines that even the elders could not dream of. Kugo stretched, muscles sore but spirit light. He realized that, as a human, he need not fear his shadow or chase blindly after his flame. He could enjoy life's journey. He remembered stories from his childhood, tales of an older hero who once roamed these lands, someone who had taught him the first stance of martial arts. That hero had vanished in mysterious circumstances, leaving Kugo with unanswered questions. Maybe one day, he would find answers, retrace that hero's steps, and discover secrets that predated his own birth. Romulan plotted a course in his mind. He would remain on Earth a while longer. He sensed that this was not the end of their story, merely a turning point. There were other worlds, other magics, and he wondered what would happen if beings from these worlds crossed paths more frequently. The delicate balance of Earth, with its triad of humans, shadows, and flames, might one day be tested by greater cosmic forces. As they drifted off to sleep in their borrowed guest rooms, the trio knew this story was only one episode in a longer saga. They had come from somewhere, Cheyenne's past life on another planet, Kugo's unknown mentor from his youth, Romulan's distant training among the stars, and they would go somewhere else. Adventures awaited in distant lands, perhaps new kingdoms forged by powerful elders, cosmic threats that would challenge the very fabric of naming magic, and maybe even the emergence of new forms of love and friendship that defied the old rules. For now, though, they rested under quiet skies, knowing that life's greatest treasures could not be forced by volume or violence. There would be a tomorrow, and with it, new names to speak, new secrets to uncover, and new bonds to form. Their journeys were just beginning.